Hello and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion to learn your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Prez, one of several lore-focused folks, and I've got my totally bodacious cowabunga surfing cohorts with me today, Matt Rossi and Eric O'Day. How you doing, guys?
Not too bad. It's time for midnight, and I'm at like 12:01. I haven't had a lot of time. I've had life interrupted for this weekend for early access, so I'm only a little bit into the story. But I'm calling my main Blood Elf character, just kind of checking out Silvermoon, and that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing this weekend.
Heck yeah, and I think that's a good time. How about you, Matt?
Well, because of what we were talking about before and the thing you just referenced in your intro, I just flashed on a joke that my wife and I have had for a few years now. Whenever one of us says, "Oh God, I'm so itchy," the other one goes, "The blind swordsman," and just that's in my head now. Just every time. And I know it wasn't so itchy. I know that wasn't his name. It was Satoshi, wasn't it? I'm not insane, am I?
Yamato Hitoshi. Or
Yeah,
Hitoshi Yamato, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just, so itchy, the blind swordsman. I don't know why that sounds so, to me, so itchy sounds like it's like a samurai name,
It kind of
anyway,
does. Yeah, so we were talking about Ninja Turtles before we started recording the show. So if you ever want to know about Ninja Turtles lore, comics, movies,
oh God, please,
TV shows, let us know, and we'll be more than happy to do an episode on
There's
it.
so much Ninja Turtles, guys. If you just know the cartoon, there's so much more.
There's so much more. But we're not going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about questions that you, our wonderful listeners, have sent into us. There are two things that I would like to kind of get out of the way at the front. One is I do want to thank all of our listeners for continuing to support us. And I do want to give a special shout out to somebody I ran into in game today before the recording. Shout out to Denethar from Arathor. Thank you for being a continued listener. We appreciate that support. If you are a listener and a supporter of us, or you just want us to answer questions, I do want to remind you that we thrive off that. So you can go ahead and send those in to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. We ask that you specify which of our three shows that it is for, because we just have Lore Watch, Blizzard Watch, and the Tavern Watch, which are our tabletop imprint. Be sure to just specify what show you want us to answer those questions for, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you don't want to do that, you can also hit us up on Discord. We have the Q and Podcast question channel, which is open for everybody. Same rules apply. If you are a Patreon supporter, we ask that you go ahead and use the Patreon Q and Podcast questions channel. It's set aside specifically for you and our Patreon subscribers, where we can look there first. And it's a little extra way of saying thank you. And I do want to put this out there for you, something that I've been very interested in lately, and I've been talking with a lot of people, and I'm interested to hear your stories on it. Also, feel free to send us how you got into the lore of Blizzard, how you got sucked into it, what interests you about it. I'd like to know how you engage with that section of it, not just how we view it, but I like knowing how other people do that. So feel free to send that in. I look at all of them. I would love to know. And if it's a particularly interesting or touching story or something like that, maybe we'll read it out on the show as well. But that, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're kind of going to jump around a few places. We're going to try to avoid midnight spoilers, but there may be some, I'll call it midnight vibe checks, where we may reference something that is potentially in the expansion as a result of some of these questions without actually going into too many details, trying to keep it vague so that you guys can go through and experience yourself. And I will say, if you are playing Midnight, I highly recommend that you do the stay a while and listen every single chance you get. They have gone out of their way to do some incredible character building and storytelling through these otherwise missed quiet moments if you don't take the time to click and sit and wait. And we will absolutely be talking about these in the future, because, man, there's some good stuff there. But this one comes from Mayron, who has sent us quite a bit. We're going to start with one, though, as a special treat for my friend Matt here. A few months ago, I asked in which era you would run a Warcraft RPG, and the answers were great, including one focus on the War of the Ancients. Now I want to expand on that. If you were to run 2 Warcraft RPG campaigns, one focus on Alliance characters and one on Horde characters, what would those 2 stories be? Bonus question, when are you going to play Warcraft RPG on the Tavern Watch? I can answer that one at least now, as soon as I can get everybody to agree to it, because that book is burning a hole on the shelf of both me and Matt. I know that for a fact. But Matt, I'll give it to you first.
I got both the Warcraft RPG and World of Warcraft the RPG.
I have the Diablo one too,
Like,
the old
yeah,
Diablo
oh, me
one.
too. Yeah, I do. Diablerie. Yeah, absolutely. Diablo 2, Diablerie. Yeah, I got that. Here's the thing. I was thinking about this in terms of like how I would make it the most fun for the most amount of people. Like if I actually had two groups that would show up for two separate separate campaigns, and I decided what I would do is I would run one campaign starting on Draenor. That this would be the one with like orcs in it. So I guess Horde, and advancing from there to arriving on Azeroth, to the the whole deal of forming the Horde as we know it now, just before World of Warcraft comes out. Basically, in that thing, except they play as characters who are jumping back and forth through time. So one day, it's like Quantum Leap with a party of Horde characters, and you jump back to like the very beginning, and then you jump forward to just before the Dark Portal opens, and you jump forward again to Cairn is finally joining up with the rest of the Horde to fight the centaurs, and then eventually, of course, Mount Hyjal, and you jump back and forth to like highlight periods where they're basically fighting the Infinite Dragonflight to keep the Horde from being destroyed. Because I don't know if you noticed this, but a lot of times it felt like the Infinite Dragonflight was trying to destroy the Horde. Like if you go back to original vanilla and BC WoW, and it felt like, why are we here at Stratholme, Infinite Dragonflight, to prevent Arthas from becoming the Lich King? Which is a big deal, because if Arthas doesn't become the Lich King, the chances are very good that we don't survive the coming of the Horde. I mean, not of the Horde, of the Scourge. Like, the whole deal with him actually helps weaken the Scourge pretty successfully. If not for him fighting to try and kill the three Dreadlords, everything goes in a different direction. So I keep thinking about that would be really cool to do Horde characters who are jumping back and forth like that. For the Alliance characters, I would do something that's based on something that's been bugging me for years. At the time that Warlords of Draenor came out, one thing people kept pointing out was that if on that alternate Draenor they didn't jump to Azeroth the way that they did in our timeline, is there an Azeroth out there that the Horde never came to? Is there an Azeroth where there's no Lich King because Gul'dan never, Ner'zhul and Gul'dan never open a portal to it? It never happens. Like, what would that world be like? And what if the Alliance characters show up in that world and find out that things are not as good as they might seem to be in the first, session? The first session, it's like, yay, it's a utopia. And then you find out some things are much worse than you think they are. So that'd be one of the ideas I've got going, two of the ideas in terms of stuff I would do with a Warcraft role-playing game that I was running, which, by the way, I would probably run using a Powered by the Apocalypse game, or maybe something a little bit more crunchy if I felt like it. Honestly, you could probably do it in D&D 5e, because the Warcraft and World of Warcraft games were both in 3rd edition, so I don't think it would be that hard to run it in 5e. But yeah, so that's me.
Eric, what about you?
I thought it would be cool. I always like the throwbacks and to go as far back as you can. I think it would be cool to pick up the original thread of orcs and humans, the original Warcraft, and make your own characters and have it be part of that campaign, because there's almost no characters there. Like in World of Warcraft, we're the player characters, and there's so many that you lose track of, and you have to listen to a podcast called Lore Watch to even sort it out. But going all the way back to Warcraft, it takes a while before you even get to like a couple named characters. So if you had a party that was going on these missions, that was, hey, we heard there's these weird green skin humanoids coming out of the southern area, but your missions are to go explore that. There's some dungeons sprinkled in there. There are some characters. You could, now that we have 30 years of story on top of that, you could take some characters that were maybe old enough to be around there and see their younger versions and things like that. So I think it would be fascinating to do something like that, where you would take that structure and just kind of fill in where you think what fascinating things you think could have happened but might have happened, but keep that main narrative. And then obviously those two campaigns for the orcs and humans end in different ways, so you'd have to figure out how to reconcile that. But yeah, the idea of something like that, or something like the idea of a party of characters living in one place with stuff happening all around them, and then you could go, each kind of campaign or couple of sessions would be just huge leaps in time. Like imagine just a party of Horde characters that live, in the suburbs of Orgrimmar, and the events of all of the expansions of World of Warcraft happen, and all these things. How many cutscenes have we have, and how many battles have we fought outside the gates? And they're just kind of like there trying to survive and having all these things happen to them. It would be good if it was like, okay, what session are we in? What time period are we in this week? Well, now, Orgrimmar is under siege, and now the demon hunters have showed up, and all those kind of things. So yeah, picking just the right era seems pretty fun.
All right. Well, I've got 2 answers, so strap in here. For the Horde side, I thought it would be interesting, and maybe for both of these, to go into sort of a microcosm of stories as opposed to some of the larger events that we know have already happened. So avoiding the wars, avoiding necessarily the events that we participated in, whether we played through them in the RTSs or in through World of Warcraft. So for the Horde side, I actually thought it would be interesting to sort of dissect what happened in the Gurubashi Empire. So actually going through every player as a troll. Maybe they're Darkspear, maybe they're from any of the other tribes that made up the Gurubashi Empire in Stranglethorn Vale. Because one of the things that I always thought was interesting is the Darkspear, because this is Vol'jin and his people, they were part of this Gurubashi Empire. But because of the constant warring and because of how small they were relatively compared to everybody else, they eventually sort of fled and were basically forced to settle on a chain of islands instead, where we find them today, or we found them originally. But they were also very different than a lot of the other trolls of that era as well, particularly the Shadow Hunters. Shadow Hunters were a very specific Darkspear thing, and they had a more profound connection with the Loa and the spirit of hunting and everything else. And I thought it would be interesting to go back and run a game potentially where everybody is members of, the Gurubashi Empire, trying to navigate this war-torn, politically charged environment, while also trying to get the maximum number of their people out safely. This sort of like extraction of their people from this volatile region. And I thought that would be really cool and potentially very compelling, because as the story one, we haven't really been told. We've got bits and pieces of it from various books and short stories, but it gives players this sort of perfect framework in my mind where they can take actions that haven't been predefined. We know that there is a result, but it is not a finite result. The number of failures and successes of how many escaped, we don't know what that final number was. So you can have stakes even knowing what the end state is. And it's very rare that you get to do that when you're trying to set something in a story that has already been established. And the best part is there's no offense to Matt or anything like that, but it avoids what I struggle with players, which is time stuff. Because while it's fun, not everybody at the table can sort of handle the mentality of bouncing back and forth through time. And so it sort of removes that from the element, which is why I think I answered this question a while ago, why I would never run a Caverns of Time base game, because I think that's a little too, it doesn't fit. There's no stakes, I guess would be the best way to. For the Alliance side,
to me, the stakes are you die.
Sure.
But, I get what you're saying. I'm the kind of guy who really loves complicated time travel. Sorry.
No, there's nothing wrong with that, and I absolutely love playing in those types of games. But for me, it's when I say player consequence, I mean telling a story where the consequence exists beyond their single character. I'm the type of player that if don't have anything else to lose, I know how I would think. I will be an absolute chaos gremlin because if my character dies, it's just my character. Versus if my character dies, this orphanage goes up in flames. So like giving something that is like gives stakes in that regard, I think forces them to be a little more invested. At the same, on the Alliance side, I thought about a parallel with that, and it sort of fits almost perfectly, which is Normorgon. Normorgon was once a bustling city. It was a thriving gnomish like civilization, essentially. And I'd like to explore potentially what life was like for the gnomes during that time and what led into the disaster that caused the radiation to cause the leper gnomes epidemic, to cause the trogs to go haywire, to cause them to lose the complicated and surprisingly large underground city of Gnomergon, and then actually have it be something that they can compare and contrast to what Mechagon became, right? Like I personally think that would be really cool. I would love to run a game like that for folks where they can get to explore gnome culture, which I've heard from several people, including Liz. I see you, Liz. I acknowledge you, Liz. That there's not enough gnome storytelling in the game these days. It tends to be all elves and trolls all the way down for the most part, which is not wrong. So I thought that would be potentially interesting as well, to get them to sort of have that moment of experiencing what gnome civilization was like, and then have it lead up to that catastrophe, that big event where, you know, the radiation starts making people sick. They have to investigate and figure out what's happening. Maybe they're tasked by Mechatork. You know, we need our best and brightest minds to figure out what the cause of this is. And then have that same thing where it's like, now we know what's going on. Now people are starting to go crazy, and you're starting to have this like assault upon the rest of Normorgon, and you got to get out. You got to get to your allies, the closest allies being the dwarves over in Ironforge. But you can't necessarily get word to them. You have to do it yourself. And using your cunning, your inventions, and using the city itself as ways to get out and to get people out before, you know, everything collapses and leaves it to the Gnomergon that we know it was before Operation Gnomergon, before they reclaimed bits and parts of it. So, like, I think that those would be two very interesting stories to potentially tell. And maybe, I hope, people would be interested in maybe playing and experiencing that. I don't know. You guys can tell me if you think those would be fun or not.
I mean, I can certainly see ways that I would enjoy them. I think for the Gurubashi one, though, you know what you got me immediately thinking? I immediately wanted to one of the players is playing the Amani diplomat.
Yeah.
It was like, he's there to observe, but sometimes he tries to screw things up. But then again, he's like, I may hate you, but I hate the Zandalari more. And oh my word, do I hate the humans more than that. So, the humans from Stormwind are invading? Oh, I'm down. I'll kill things. Sure, bring them on. Because you could do a lot with the inter-troll rivalries. Like, the fact that the Amani and Gurubashi absolutely hated each other, and the Zandalari used that to get them both out of their, before they destroyed the Zandalari. So it was like, why don't you guys go fight the bug things? And, because you're so brave and heroic. And the fact that there's like still like I forget the name of it, but in what's the Battle for Azeroth zone with the fox people?
Oh,
Muldoon.
Muldoon?
Muldoon.
Okay. In there's an old city that is the original home of the Amani. I don't think you ever see the original home of the Gurubashi.
No, but you do see the Amani.
And I've always been like, how did you go from there to the entire north part of the Eastern Kingdoms before it was the Eastern Kingdom? So there's a lot of cool stuff you could do with like the inter-troll stuff that would make me really interested in.
Yeah, like I said, I just thought it would be fun because I don't think we get enough troll storytelling for that era. So it'd be interesting to fill in the blanks. But yeah,
I'd roll a troll. I'd roll a gnome. I'd roll a troll. I'd roll a gnome. I'd do this.
All right. Well, that's at least 2 players. All right. Well, thank you very much for that question, Mayron. We're going to move on to some others here real quick. And then I know you sent in about 5 questions. We might have time for more. We'll see. If not, we'll save them for future episodes. This one comes from Mark, Paladin on Bronzebeard. We get this type of question a lot. So Let's see if we can kind of maybe give a little more color to it. Is Elune a world soul in its most natural form? Is this why Aman'Thul doesn't like her? She transformed before he could influence her. Also, the look of the Voidspire reminds me of a Naaru. Could the Naaru be originally have been void creatures that were changed to the light? I'll go first here real quick. Elune being a world soul, I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I think they've pretty much established that she's not in many of the things that they've brought forward, especially talking about her relationships and how things were. And I know that that was a talking point for a lot of folks where it's like, oh, well, Elune was in a relationship with, why can't I think of her name now? The naturalist one.
A&R.
A&R. And it's like, well, World Soul dates World Soul. And it's like, not necessarily. Cosmic forces are cosmic forces. They're just on a different scale than us. Doesn't mean that she's a World Soul. And really, we've already established that Aman'Thul definitely didn't like her because Elune is wild chaos naturally, right? Not in a bad way. Chaos doesn't necessarily mean bad. It means unpredictability. It means that it doesn't necessarily follow a specific design in nature. And we talk about this a lot on the main podcast, and Matt and I will go on random science tangents with this, like divergent evolution and convergent evolution and items like that. Elune is all of those things. Aman'Thul cannot stand variance. It's very similar to, in my opinion, the description of the void and the light. Elune allows for all natural possibilities. Yes, she's going to try to do things like maybe save her favorite children when they were burning in a tree. But for the most part, nature is this wonderful wild thing that flourishes. That's life. That's her sort of domain. And Aman'Thul is order. It wants things. He wants things a very specific way. And if it deviates from that, or if it can't be made to heal or brought to heal, then he doesn't like it and it needs to be destroyed. Look at Sargeras.
Let me jump in for a second for people who remember old sitcoms. You guys remember the Neil Simon play, The Odd Couple?
I do.
Where you have two characters who, one of them is extremely rigidly orderly presenting. Like that's his entire, his entire life is being orderly. Oscar is not. Oscar is literally, the reason Oscar the Grouch from Sesame Street is living in a trash can is because he is inspired by Oscar from, The Odd Couple.
Perfectly portrayed by Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, by the way.
Yeah. And didn't do too bad for the TV show either. Quite frankly, with Jack Klugman. I can't remember the other actor, and he's a freaking genius and a classic. But point being, these characters just don't get along on a fundamental level, where it's like everything that is sacred to Aman'Thul is at best unimportant to Elune, and everything that is what Elune is part of makes Aman'Thul nervous. Like it's a fundamental disconnect. It doesn't mean that they're enemies necessarily. It doesn't mean that Aman'Thul is trying to kill her. But it does mean that he is very loath to go along with ideas of hers, which is why he heavily discouraged A&R's whatever. And again, as Joe pointed out, trying to make it into them being being two girls, girlfriends. That's trying to impose our mortal perspective on these ancient, endless beings. But whatever their relationship was, Aman'Thul would inherently discourage it because it is not orderly.
Yeah, I mean, Aman'Thul didn't really care for A&R either in that regard, like wanted her to be very rigid in what she did and follow his instructions specifically too.
Yeah, because she's already too chaotic and now she's hanging out with chaos over there.
Yep. Chaos that's also tied to the light, like in a form of the light, which we'll get into in a moment. But yeah, Eric, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I like where the question's getting at, like the idea of why specifically Aman'Thul doesn't like her. Is it because she's specifically something, or is it just because she's not order? And it seems like, what you guys are getting at is it's because she's very much not order. She's not, or she doesn't conform to what Aman'Thul's idea of how shaping the universe should be. Like, would he be as mad at the Winter Queen if she gave Aenar a big femur instead of Aenar giving her a branch of the mother tree, just because it was not order, it was something else? Or would that be, not as bad because something specific about Aenar sets him off?
I don't think it's just that. I don't think it's that he just doesn't like Elune. I think it is very much what Elune represents. But I also do think that if the Winter Queen gave Aenar a giant bone, wow, dude, phrasing by the way. I feel like if that were to happen, it would still be not the proper order. Because that's the other thing. It's not just that Aman'Thul wants order. Aman'Thul has a very specific order in mind.
Yeah, and if anything deviates from his plan of that order, like we saw that with even his Watchers, right? Like if you look at like Ra-Den had a very different idea of how order should be structured, and it was anathema to Aman'Thul. Like when Aman'Thul's personality crashed into him, that's why it was so discordant for him. Not just because it was a Titan's power, but like imagine you're Aman'Thul looking through Ra-Den's eyes and seeing what Ra-Den's been doing, and it doesn't match with what you told him to do. You're gonna get a little angry inside of your cage, especially after you just got splintered from whatever body you had. So like, yeah, there's a level of that order. Yes, but all order isn't the same.
Aman'Thul seems a little bit like the world's worst HOA president, and his way is the way, and anything else isn't going to go because it has to be done his way.
That is the best possible analogy that I can think of for it. He is 100% your terrible HOA's president. That is exactly who Aman'Thul is. Man.
Yeah, I mean, very much down to the part where he shows up at your house and starts telling you, you got to do this and you got to do that, or he's going to enforce, bylaw 72. And you're like,
I'm not even part of your HOA. I don't care.
Or now. But
and then he's trying to figure out what Aenar is doing, and he's like, "What do you mean you planted a tree?"
Yeah, but also think about it in terms of this. As much as we think of the Titan as like the prime movers of things, the Pantheon of Death in Shadowlands shows us that in some ways, even beings on that level of power are ultimately working towards something someone else came up with.
Yeah.
The first ones created the blueprint for reality. And we've seen at least one member of the Pantheon of Death reject it. We don't know how closely Aman'Thul is hewing to the plan originally vouchsafed to him and his people versus how much was maybe no one told him what he was supposed to be doing, and so he's been making it up. The point you made in your thing about what if Elune is a world soul who wasn't reached by Aman'Thul. Aman'Thul was a world spirit, world soul that wasn't reached by Aman'Thul.
Mm-hmm.
If a world soul has a look that you get when it's not in any way, shape, or form interfered with by anybody else, that would be Aman'Thul.
But that's according to Aman'Thul.
Well, yeah, according to Aman'Thul, but just right for now, go with it.
Yeah. Yep.
That would mean that Aman'Thul had to come up with his own rules when he came into full existence. And then he imposed them on everybody else that he awoke. He guided them. Nobody did that for him. So maybe he can't conceive of a different way to do it than the way he did it, because that's the only way he can imagine, because it's the only way he's ever actually experienced. In a weird sort of way, Aman'Thul's the kind of guy you can imagine saying "my way or the highway" to people he knows can't get to the highway. There's no escape from this for people. In a weird sort of way, Sargeras becomes the first one who was reached by Aman'Thul here, and therefore his rebellion is the first guy Aman'Thul taught anything to, saying, wait a minute, you never told me about any of this weird crap. I don't think you know what you're doing, And that whole thing, we constantly focus on about how crazy Sargeras is, but we don't focus much on how crazy Aman'Thul was after the first person he ever befriended and helped that told him to F off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Sargeras walked in and was like, "Nope, not listening to you guys. Gonna destroy everything." And just again, you got this. If you think of Aman'Thul as the HOA, president, Sargeras becomes the gopher hunting caddy from Caddyshack. You know, he's destroying everything. He's just mowing down lawns. He's blowing up shrubs. He cannot stand the idea that those groundhogs might get into anyone's yard, and he has decided to destroy their yards, all yards. He will destroy every yard until there are no yards that those gophers can get into. Because if he doesn't do this, the gophers will win. And meanwhile, you have Aman'Thul over there going, "No! My lawns!" Well, this is a weird place.
If Bill Murray used atom bombs instead of dynamite.
Or giant swords.
Now, there's a second part to this question that I want to kind of get to, because I think we're going to have a little bit of more interesting discussion here. Not that the first part wasn't, Aman'Thul and his HOA with his popped collar from his polo shirt and all. The part about the Void Spire reminding you of a Naaru, and then asking the question, could the Naaru be originally have been from the void that were then charged to the light? So this is one of those things where there's a theme here in this question that is actually present in Midnight. I'm not going to get into many specifics because it is very important to the campaign, but this is a question that's been asked a lot of times in World of Warcraft in general, where the balance of light and dark, ever since we first learned that Naaru could become Dark Naaru. Why are they able to become Dark Naaru? Why are they able to essentially become void creatures, right? Like they're not, they seem to have complete absence of the light in those moments, completely change their personalities. Their power becomes exponentially more destructive in these moments. How is that possible? And we also know, going back to Shadowlands here, if you remember your Revendreth lore, the Naaru waged war on Revendreth. The Naaru blew up a lot of Revendreth, but not before one of them got captured. And when we save that Naaru, what is the one thing we learn about it? The experiments and torture and alterations that have been made by the denizens of Revendreth under Sire Denathrius's control have altered the Naaru in such a way that their own people would not take them back. Now, Matt and I have often talked about that these are all supporting points that mean that the Naaru are malleable in some form, whether they are essentially resonant creatures, is I think what we refer to them as, that sort of they can conduct energy and bond with it in a way that few other living creatures can. And as a result of that, they can be altered by that because it's essentially a core facet of them. We've talked about this in relation to Apexis crystals, Anima crystals. We've talked about this with the original crystals that Velen and them were as well, that there seems to be this connection there where we see these items, the Dragon Soul, for God's sake, can alter what they are and what they do based off of the energy poured into them. They essentially become super conduits. There is a relation between the Void and the Naaru that we do not fully understand yet. It is slowly coming into focus a little bit more in Midnight. It is not completely answered, but we do get some of these burning questions, not necessarily answered, but clarified a little bit. They start to zero into it.
Addressed would be a
yeah.
I also want to throw in something while we're talking about this.
Please, absolutely.
If we're talking about crystals and we're talking about throwing energy at them and seeing what happens, I refer us once again to the creation of Ashbringer, where we had some orc necromancer or warlock or something invaded Azeroth along with the rest of his brothers, and when he met Alexandros for the first time...
Mograine.
Yeah, Mograine, sorry. But Alexandros Mograine. He basically destroyed his hand. After he killed the necromancer, he tries to pick up the crystal he was using to summon things, and it destroys his hand.
Mm-hmm.
The energy in it, the dark, shifting, seething energy in it, destroys his hand. He brings it back. Not Terran Mill. Is it not Terran Mill?
Torren Mill.
Yeah, okay. He brings it back to there. I thought it was like the other town.
Nope, it's the town at the base of Tarnmill.
Okay, he goes there. He brings it to a bunch of other members of various Paladin orders, including our old friend Satan Dathrathon, who will come up later maybe, but trust me, he is somebody we should remember.
Sorry, South Shore. South Shore.
South Shore. South Shore is the Alliance town. Tarmill's the Horde town. But at the time, they were both just human towns.
Yeah.
And people there, including like the original High General Abendis, the father of Brigitte Abendis, and Satan Dathrathan, I believe, they basically start arguing about what this thing is. And finally, Abendis is fed up with the discussion. He goes, let's just destroy it. And he hits it with the light, and it starts to quiver. And so they all start hitting it with the light. It doesn't get destroyed. It turns into a gigantic beacon of the light. This crystal is now resonating with the light and giving off the light. And he takes, when he attempts to touch it, Mograine touches it, it heals him. The same way previously it destroyed his hand, it now regrows his hand. And he takes it to Ironforge. At the time, Magni is heartbroken over the death of his brother, although he turned out not to be dead. But anyway, he makes for Mograine the blade that we call Ashbringer. And eventually we call Mograine Ashbringer because of him using it to turn entire, swaths of undead into ashes. That crystal, we don't know what it is. To this day, we don't know what that crystal was. It could have been one of the Anima crystals. It could have been an Apexis crystal. All we know is that Orc Necrolite brought it with him. And it was completely charged with the void. And he was using it alongside the invading forces, which were, again, they were not void. They were slaves to the Burning Legion, not to the void. Why did he have a void crystal? Where did he get it? Was it void when he got it? If you think about that idea that this crystal was possibly one of the Animi crystals, the Animi crystals all came from the original crystal that broke into fragments during the Draenei flight from what is, Argus, their homeworld, when they were also Manari. That was their original name. Each of those crystals shows a different resonance. Like the Leaf Shadow, the one that we think of as so important because it's the one that was actually hiding an entire city from the Horde. Leaf Shadow resonated with nature. In a weird sort of way, the Animi crystals are like crystals that if you look at them as a matrix, they were originally one crystal, and then they broke apart into all these different crystals, each to one form of energy or power that associates with one of the points on the, for lack of a better word, cosmic compass that we see in both the original Chronicle and the Chronicle. What was it? The one of the Shadowlands were called? Grimoire of the Shadowlands, which reverses it. And that's to show us that it can be viewed from different angles. I find myself wondering if the Naaru, if that's what happens with a Naaru.
Yeah.
Like we know that a Naaru can have its core effectively almost destroyed, and then it can be basically regrown from just a piece of it.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that, and I want to let Eric talk in a moment, and this is something I've been thinking about recently too, same thing, right? Like going that same rabbit hole as you there, Matt, where it's like, what if the Naaru were all part of one originally large thing, right? One large structure, one large entity. It's a theme, and I hate to call it a trope, but it's something we've seen Blizzard storytellers do for a lot of their other games as well. A gigantic.
They did it in Warlords of Draenor.
They did it in Draenor. They did it in Diablo. They've established this even in StarCraft. If you want to talk about the actual, the Zerg, right? Like the Zerg and the Protoss were originally one entity. They were one cosmic being that then split. Like this is something Blizzard likes to go back to the well on pretty frequently, and it makes certain sense in the story. So had the Naaru existed as a larger cosmic entity before that fully resonated with all aspects of the universe, maybe, and this is nothing to support this, but maybe the Naaru are the resultant last pieces of whatever happened to the first ones.
You know what this makes me think?
Go ahead.
We know that only a prime Naaru is supposed to be able to awaken those Naaru that come in descent from below, the ones that descend from it.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that when we were trying to save Zera, we used a tear of Elune to reawaken her core.
Uh-huh.
So that we could communicate with it. What if the reason that the tears of Elune are crystalline structures, and the reason that the Naaru, who are apparently in some way related to her, are crystalline structures, is because Elune was a giant crystalline structure that deliberately broke herself up
To be in multiple places at once.
Or she's just naturally distributed.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're talking about Elune and Naaru being a hive mind?
No, just a naturally distributed entity. Like, think of it this way, not a hive mind. They don't, when fully connected, they all communicate with each other.
But they're individual and distinct personalities, right?
Yes.
They have to make a conscious effort to talk to each other.
Yeah, and more importantly, when they're all, like, think of, I'm going to use an example that I think works pretty well for this. The Geth in Mass Effect.
Mm.
When the Geth are independent, just a few dozen Geth subroutines in a Geth body doing stuff not fully connected to the rest of the group, they're kind of dumb because there's only like a few dozen subroutines in that body. It's pretty easy to kill it. Legion had 1,100 and something subroutines, which was why Legion was fairly autonomous.
Mm-hmm.
The full Geth collective is not a hive mind, it's a consensus. Because they can think faster, communicate faster. Total democracy is possible for them because they have the time to do it. Like a billionth of a second is enough time for them to come to consensus. Whereas for us, that would be almost impossible. And so Elune could just be the biggest part of the consensus. What we call Elune might just be the personality that is the one that essentially clones itself to create these subgroups, but the subgroups they're not as full as her because she herself is many millions of consciousnesses all communicating together, whereas they are divorced from it, not cut out, but it's like if you send the Voyager probe into space, it cannot communicate with the full amount of Earth's electromagnetic communications power. It's a little drone out there in the middle of nowhere. It takes like several days for its signals to get back.
Yeah, going down that. Go ahead. I was gonna say going down that route also makes me think of like the King in Black stuff with the symbiotes and Marvel, where they're kind, like you said, they're not a hive mind per se. They are a consensus tied back to a single personality. Right, where like,
but if they're cut off long enough, they start developing their own personalities because they have to.
Yeah, the Clintar do that. Yeah, right. Like it's just how they are. They're both tied to each other, but individuals. So there is potentially something there, and this is not us saying that Elune is a Naaru.
We have no idea.
I still think that Elune is not necessarily a Naaru. Her relation to the Naaru. She may be the progenitor of the Naaru, and as a result of that, they are all sort of splinters of her. But
look at it this way: an orc is not Grond, the giant mountain monster that became all the things that are like walking around with two legs on Draenor. Like they all descend back, from orcs to ogres, from ogres to Ogron, from Ogron, going back until you hit the Gron and the Magaron and finally Grond. But they're all descended from Grond. But they're all of Grond.
Well, then the reason that I think this makes a little bit of sense too or potentially makes sense, is that Elune has a dark side. We saw this with the Night Warrior. What is Tyrande channeling when she's in Night Warrior mode? Because it sure isn't sunlight. It's the pale, cold, burning moonlight that happens during an eclipse. It is very go back and watch the scenes. Go back and watch the animations and the cutscenes involving the Night Warrior. There's a reason her eyes are black. There's a reason that everything Tyrande is doing as the Night Warrior feels extraordinarily void adjacent. And it's because it's a resonant power. And again, the light and the void are two sides of the same coin. We know this. We know that this has been established in lore from the very beginning, and it's one of the few things that hasn't changed since the light and the void have been introduced. There's a reason why Sargeras, in order to like fight the void and light, didn't wield one against the other. He sought Fel, the absolute destruction of both. Like, that is not a mistake, right? That is.
And think about this too. We're talking about Elune here. We're talking about what Elune's relationship to Naaru is. Let's look at the fact that Elune can simultaneously call down strikes of white hot, light, the light, and blanket an entire moon in permanent eclipse. The chosen warrior of Elune is the Night Warrior. And what is the Night Warrior doing? The Night Warrior is very void.
The light warrior, the Night Warrior is extinguishing light.
Yep. And that's where Fel comes from. Again, because what do you extinguish light with? The void. And what happens to the void when you do that? It gets destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
There is a the fact that we've never actually seen a Fel side to Elune does not mean there isn't one.
Yeah. Eric, I want to give you a chance to talk because we've been going on, so I apologize.
We're doing that thing we do, man.
Yeah. No, I like all of this question because it kind of gets at, flipping things on their head. Like, we just assume that the Naaru are creatures of the light, and that when we drain off the light, they go into this state. But what if they started as creatures of the void and something charged them with that light, and then once that light runs out or gets siphoned away, then they revert back to what they originally were. And we don't know. We still don't know what a lot of these things are, the true nature of Naaru, the true nature of Elune. I think that's maybe the most fascinating thing, because Elune predates World of Warcraft. There's references to Elune in Warcraft 3, so that's been 24 years that we still don't know what this godlike entity is. So that we're still talking about it after this much, but we might actually get answers. I mean, these are the kind of things that might get answered in an expansion called Midnight.
Yeah, and I think we're already starting to see shades of it too, because there's other entities that are sort of in this mix, and I'll bring them up here because I think it's kind of important to talk about. You know that Lothraxion is involved because Warriors of the Light, the Light Forge, the Army of the Light are present in this expansion. That is a given. We know this. We've known this for, several months before the expansion. And what is Lothraxion? He is an entity created in the Shadowlands by Sire Denathrius with a very specific purpose that has fully embraced the light into himself and become a conduit for it. He has been altered and reforged by the light. Turallion, a mortal, a human mortal, was reforged by the light to become light forged. The Draenei that have accepted this have all done so as well. They are not the same entity as they were before. They have been altered by channeling this power through them. However, that means that there's the potential for them to do this with other power as well. The same goes for the Naaru. If a Naaru is completely drained of the light and becomes a void entity, what happens if you take, I don't know, the wild planes, the dimension of all wild magic and wild power and chaos that Elune is definitely next to, that Aenar definitely hailed from and was most attuned to, and that we think that the Wild Gods and technically the Emerald Dream butt up against. What happens if you take that power, that energy, unfiltered, and power it into a Naaru core? Do you get a plant Naaru? Do you get something that is so absolutely fused by that life energy that it becomes like the Botani on Draenor, that become like that, which again, themes of this, hints of this are dealt with in the Midnight expansion, and I highly encourage you to keep your eyes open as you're doing this stuff, and you'll see what we're talking about. What happens if you do this with not just void or that, with fire, with water, with any of these things that we know have a cosmic presence, a cosmic power footprint, can they resonate with it? From going back to what Matt talked about with the leaf blade and all the other different crystals, like I would say yes, there's a very good possibility, and that it just so happens that we keep charging them back up with the light because we, as entities with limited cosmic understanding, only understand that you use the light to fight void, but it's not necessarily the case. And I think that's one of the most fascinating parts about it. Because the Naaru, in a lot of ways, in a way that the Light and Order and Aman'Thul would absolutely hate, almost have infinite potential here. If they can channel and resonate with any energy, the Naaru contain multitude. We potentially are the ones that keep forcing the light back into them and keeping them on this weird cycle and path, which, man, wouldn't that be a real kick in the pants if Elune comes back and says, "What did you do to my children? What did you do?"
Here's a weird thing to say about that then. Why do Naaru draw souls to them?
You mean Anima, which might tie into our next question?
Yeah, I think that is in fact what you should probably be talking about.
Yeah,
so it is something to think about.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and get this next one here from Alex, which thanks for sending this in. What actually is Anima? Is it the residual energy from an entity's life, or is it a base part of the universe's design? Is it possibly both? The first one's own experience infusing the energy that would fuel all life to come. Is it what Mistweavers use? Technically, it's what all healers use. In a sort of way, except
it's what all spellcasters use.
It's what all spellcasters use. What all druids use when they shapeshift. But Matt, would you like to talk about the core idea of Anima?
Well, there's also, we have to point out that there is some things that are ambiguous or not fully explored. One of them is, did we see Anima in Mists of Pandaria? Because at the time, people who worked at Blizzard said no, the Anima that you see in Mists of Pandaria used by the Mogu is not the same Anima as we see in Shadowlands. Those people don't work there anymore.
Also,
and so
I was going to say, also, it was sort of a non-committal answer during a BlizzCon. So, yeah.
Yeah. So never believe anything till you see it in the game. And even then be convinced that the next expansion could change it. In terms of what Anima is, in its most fundamental state in Shadowlands, Anima is revealed to us as the energy / substance that creates all existence. And the entire purpose of the Shadowlands is for the Anima that powers and abides in mortal beings. Upon their deaths, that Anima is channeled back to the Shadowlands, along with the souls of the beings that died. The souls are removed and placed in one of the Shadowlands to exist indefinitely, while the Anima is essentially filtered through one of the various realms of the Shadowlands. And there's more than 5. There's a whole bunch of them. And then that Anima is basically channeled back through places like the Winter Queen's realm, Ardenweald, into existence alongside beings that are intended to be part of a cycle of resurrection, of rebirth. For example, we were supposed to get Ursoc back.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if we'll ever get that now because he didn't get the Anima he needed, so his existence might be gone forever. But that's the basic premise of Anima. Anima is both the building blocks of and the resource that sustains everything. All the entire universe, above and below, all the slower universes, all smaller, not slower. For everything from the Shadowlands to the realm of the light to even Fel is ultimately sustained and created by Anima. It's sort of like saying, well, how can that be? How can one little thing be making up everything? Look at subatomic particles. The proper combination of subatomic particles, ultimately it all goes down to quarks. Everything is made of quarks.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is powered by quarks. It's all quarks. But that's a level of granularity that most of us don't see. In the Warcraft cosmology, you don't see the anima, you see all the things that anima makes and all the things that anima powers, but you don't see the anima itself. It's usually not seen by mortal beings. But it's so important that even Shaman named it an element.
Mm-hmm.
The spirit that you hear about when Shaman talk about the fifth element, that's anima.
And we know that
power,
for a fact, because when we're summoning
Yep.
our ancestors, if you are a farseer and a healer, you're summoning essentially, and they're using their anima to pull them from the Shadowlands to assist you in your healing endeavors. We know that. That's what it is.
Yeah. The anima is linked to them, and therefore the resonance of it allows them to be present for a moment. But as a result of this, because it is so fundamental and important, its creation and its destruction affect reality on every scale, from the most minute to the most cosmic. And with that comes the fact that it's used in every way you asked. Like everything from a spellcaster throwing like fire at someone to a druid somewhere using their power to return a tree to balance, to a shaman calling their ancestor forth, to a death knight raising the dead and using their shambling corpses as battering rams and shock troops.
Which is why Death Knights refer to it as an exhausting experience.
Yeah, it's all anima, and you are anima. Right? When your character dies, the reason you get to come back is actually explained in game as a subgroup of Kyrian who are not doing their jobs. Instead, they are returning your character's soul back to its body over and over again because you have to be here. There is a thing your character has to do to keep this whole train going. And that's why they keep going, nope, you're going right back into that body. Nope, no, you're not going anywhere. I don't care how many times you let that gnoll rip your head off. I'm putting you back. I'm going to get in so much trouble. So anima is fundamental to the game, to the existence of everything in the Warcraft cosmos.
Yep.
So do we think it is a natural entity, or do we think that the first ones designed the universe to have the anima be what the currency, what everything runs on?
Let me put you this way.
Okay.
You go ahead. I've been talking for a while. You talk.
In response to that, I personally, based off of what we know from Zereth Mortis and from learning, not necessarily what the first ones are, because we have no idea, but going into the Sepulchre, learning that the worlds are linked, learning that there's a tunnel between all the realms, that there's points that we do not fully understand, possibly strewn throughout the cosmos. My guess is that anima is by design, that anima is tied to the first ones, whether it is a piece of themselves that they then, part it out and let it blossom like a, asexual amoeba, like parting itself. Or maybe it was just something that they figured out how to do. We don't know. We know that the first ones are apparently heralded as creators of the universe. We don't know that for a fact. Again, for a while, we thought Titans were gods. Then we learned that Titans were not gods. They were just very large cosmic entities. Then we, learned that there were things above, potentially even the Titans in the first ones. We don't know if this is to make a Rick and Morty reference, if this is the Rick Sanchez car battery all the way down, where it's like different, he created a civilization inside of the car battery to fuel the car. And then that civilization created a civilization inside of another thing, a power plant, to power the battery for their god. And then so on and so forth. We don't know how many layers there are to reality here. We assume that we're at the top layer. We're probably not. But yeah, it feels like anima is deliberate. It feels, because of what it does, because the universe that we exist in is comprised of it, and because it exists in the other realms that we have traveled through, like the other planes of existence, for lack of a better term, it feels like this was a deliberate choice, not necessarily a natural cosmic choice. But I could also be very wrong. That's just my 2 cents on it.
But I'm kind of starting to getting
way
at
to look at it. Is this one, which is simpler. If you build a program in your computer that can simulate the Earth and the orbit of the planets and all that stuff, it's ultimately all running on electricity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the electricity actually comes from outside the computer, and we do still use electricity in the world that we're currently in, except what if that's a simulation? Then they would still be using electricity that comes from outside, and all of our electricity is converted something else, usually sunlight. Because either it's from things that used photosynthesis or things that ate things that used photosynthesis, who then died and got crushed down into carbon that was then burnable because it was from these things. That it all ends up being from one or other light power source in this reality into the simulation, but the simulation would do the same thing. And ultimately, it's you kind of have a combination of the turtles all the way down idea, and the fact that just because Anima is used by the first ones doesn't mean that if we assume the first ones were the first ones, that Anima didn't already exist. It might just have been completely different. Like, I'm going to use an example from a game I've been playing a lot. The Pillars of Eternity games, and I'm not going to go into Avowed, but I'm talking about the Pillars of Eternity games. They have a substance called Adra, which is apparently the conduit through which all life energy passes. It's when you die, you go in there and you're put on the wheel of resurrection. In the second game, and I know spoilers, but the game count like 2010, guys. It's revealed that the wheel that has created reincarnation is an edifice built on top of the original way things were done, and it's destroyed by a god named Eothas because he thinks it is a corruption. Everything the first one's done ultimately seems to have been an edifice to create a reality that could fight forces from outside existence, forces that devour Anima. And if that is the case, then Anima has to be present beyond the player character version of existence. Mm-hmm. The Warcraft cosmos has to basically be built on top of an edifice of Anima, because that's the thing that it's being designed to protect, if that makes sense. You wouldn't build an edifice to protect something you had to invent to make the edifice exist in the first place.
Right.
So that's
Eric,
something to keep in mind.
You had something there. I want to hear what you had to say.
Yeah, what I'm kind of starting to think about is the Anima is kind of like the lived experiences of living beings. The great beings who have experienced a lot of things have more Anima that gets transported to the Shadowlands. And if the whole universe is set up as just a way for like the cosmic forces and everything, just a way for living things on different planets to send Anima and get them to have conflicts and have great memories and things like that, just to send it there. It seems like that might be what the first ones wanted all along. I mean, and everybody who said, "Oh, I see the plan. I'm not telling you what the big plan is, but I have to interrupt it." The jailer saying, "You don't know what's coming. You don't know what it is." Could it be that everything has just been set up this way to channel Anima into the Shadowlands for some reason that we don't know yet?
All right. Anything else we want to add to that? I thank you very much for the question, Alex. I think it ties into this because, I mean, again, maybe we talk a couple minutes here about Anima and what could potentially happen with a Naaru, because I think that's where Matt was going originally.
I basically have a lot of ideas about that in terms of the Naaru might exist as essentially... Anima takes the form of everything, right? Everything's made out of Anima. What if you had a being of pure Anima? Mm-hmm. It could hold anything. It's kind of like imagining you need to work with the forces of existence, but you don't want to interact with them yourself. Maybe you can't. Maybe you're not going to be there. Maybe you just don't want to be exposed to them because, much like somebody working with highly radioactive material, if you just stick your hand in and grab it, it will kill you. You know, there's a reason that the first ones have a giant tomb. You know, it feels like they designed it. They already knew they'd be dead when all this started. So think about it in terms of a box with Waldos. You stick your hands in and you have robot hands that you control with your own hands to keep you from ever having to touch these substances. Maybe the stuff that makes up physical reality in the Warcraft cosmos is fundamentally toxic in much the same way as that elements that are created on the periodic table, the higher up you go, the more unstable and dangerous they are to living things.
That's a whole move
Maybe
for my existence.
Yeah, what?
So that's a whole mood for my existence.
Yeah, and imagine the first ones are creating a reality that can stand up to things that eat anima. They need things that are toxic to things that eat anima. It's all still running on anima, but it's more complicated. It's got more parts to it. You concentrate more matter into something, you concentrate like higher and higher atomic numbers, the thing becomes unstable and begins irradiating everything around it. You concentrate enough reality, enough anima into living things, they start becoming gods. Like look at it's turtles all the way down, but it's also turtles all the way up.
Yeah.
Maybe they're, you start seeing these beings exist that can literally kill a Titan and send its soul into the, Shadowlands. That's not supposed to be possible, but we did it. So, there's no way that anything could possibly kill the Devourers except these weird things. Don't touch them. They'll rot you away from within. It's just something I've been thinking about in terms of like the Naaru is effectively time-lapse Waldos where they'll do the work for you and they can handle being anything, but they don't, they won't be getting any feedback because they're acting on a program just like everything else around them.
Mm-hmm. Eric, any parting thoughts?
It seems like their pantheons kind of have that tier to them, depending on which one we're talking about. Like we know the Titans had the Keepers, and then they make smaller servants who make smaller servants to help them, and it seems like that's a little bit what you're getting at with I can't do this on my own, not because I don't have the time and I'm needed elsewhere, but because this I can't enter this plane, maybe like the Void Lords, or because this thing is toxic to me, or this thing I can't interact with physically. So it's just much more complicated that we don't just have a universe with planets and powerful entities going back and forth. We have all these different realms, these different dimensions going back and forth, and we seem to be able to exist on lots of different planes of existence, but other entities that are much more powerful than us can't and have to stay on their own or struggle to go from one to the other. So it seems like, again, something special about us, something special about Azeroth that lets us do a lot of these things.
All right. Well, hopefully that has answered your series of questions, my dear listeners. And if not, well, you're going to have to come back for another one because we're going to keep doing this. But I do want to thank you. Again, Blizzard Watch is made possible due to your generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means that this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to our podcast, a better chance at having your question answered on our podcast or the queue, and an ads-free site experience. Again, if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, we ask that you go ahead and send those in. podcast@blizzardwatch.com is the email. We ask that you specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you want to hit us on Discord, we have 2 channels set aside. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel, which is open for everybody. Same rules apply. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can go ahead and hit us up on the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. And again, friends, if you can't support us on Patreon, we understand. Be sure to share our content. Leave those likes. I know everybody begs for them, but they do actually matter. Leave comments on it if you have them. We love to see them, and it does help our content get served to people through whatever algorithm nonsense is happening at the time. And again, at the beginning of the show, I asked for you to maybe send in a story of how you got into the lore of something, whether it's comic books, movies, TV, why the story matters to you. I'd love to hear your stories about that. With that, friends, we'll see you next week.